So we'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the lands which we work and live, including elders past and present, and those colleagues who are joining us in the room today. And we would also like to acknowledge the victim survivors of family violence and their colleagues, friends, family members, as their experiences form and make change to the work that we do every day. We pay respect to those that do not survive their family. In the conversation today, I do also want to add that we acknowledge that all the young people that we work with predominantly are victim survivors in their own right. So the conversations that we have will often sit in a victim survivor space as well as in a person who might be using violence. We tend to steer a little bit clear of, particularly in initial parts of conversation, this might be a little bit controversial. We don't use the term family violence. We get a lot of referrals from the orange store, and the first thing they say to us is, we go, did you talk to the young person about this? Well, we told them we've got a family violence program, they're not interested. Well, of course they're not. So Craig and I both work in our Building Connections team. I manage that team, Craig's the team leader. So we have adolescent Building Connections program known as AVITH. Some might have seen or heard about it, some won't have. It's a Gippsland-based program at Quantum, been around since 2016, and it's group work in schools and communities. Predominantly schools at the moment. That's just about funding. That's not what we're funded for. And our AVITH program under kind of the Family Safety Victoria funding is in partnership with that. So we do a one-on-one family context version of our AVITH, and AVITH brings FFT to that, so we do actual work and approach within the family. So that's kind of what brings us in. So what we hear from a lot of young people is sometimes they want to learn, they want to know stuff, they want to understand, but they want to understand in the context of how that sits in the world around them. And sometimes I think we don't give them enough credit for people in this room, but outside of that, like, they don't need to know that. When we started this work, we would talk to young people about some regulation, and we do regulation and co-regulation, all that kind of stuff. But no one ever actually bothered to tell them why they were being told to breathe. Someone's like, oh my God, one more person, here, one. And I'm like, have they actually told you why to do that? And they're like, no. So we started to bring into our program conversation about neurobiology and the brain and everything else. And initially the oversight committee is like, kids really want to know about the brain? Well, actually, yeah, they kind of do. So that was only 2018 we added that, and it's been there ever since. And it works really well. And we find that if you can give it to them in plain language and understanding, they want to know this stuff. But we just need to give it to them. The understanding of the language helps them to process that information. If we have the language and the words to be able to share what we're thinking and feeling, then we don't need to use actions to communicate that. You know, we always like to think about all behaviour and all choices are a communication tool. They're a message that someone's trying to send us. If we're not getting that message, we're going to keep trying to communicate. It might be not a terribly appropriate way to communicate, still a method of communication. I think the other really key part is young people experience family violence very differently to adults. Their way of communicating and understanding that is very different to adults. How they experience that in their own peer groups and their families of choice is also very different. So we've found in the conversations that we have, if you can give context that applies to their peer group or to their relationships and what that looks like, it makes a lot more sense. For example, we've noticed over time a significant increase in financial abuse among young teens. It was coming out that there was threat from friendship groups or from previous intimate partners and partnerships that, you know, if you don't buy my lunch every day, I'm going to share this photo that I have of you. You couldn't understand how that fits and what that context looks like. So being able to give those real world examples that actually fit within the context of the young person you're working with, they're like, I get that. That makes sense now. So talking to young people about family violence, safety first. So establishing that level of safety is really key. You want to have an open relationship, and I'm going to pick on you, I'm really sorry. We don't know each other, which is why I'm not picking up. We don't know each other. If I walk up and start asking you really private and personal questions about your experience, what that's looked like, you haven't had safe adults in your world, do you want to talk to me? You're going to give me an update, right? particularly if I've asked you to come into my office, clinical with white walls, no one's going to want to talk to me because it's not comfortable, it's not safe. Possibly the last time I was in this space might have been a DFFH office when it looked like that, and that could have been when I was removed from my parents. But there's so many things that sit behind that. Anyone that's been a youth worker or with the car ride, right? How good is the car ride? Oh wait, I have teenagers, I still use the car ride. Captive audience, you can't get out and you don't have to look at anyone. We touched a little bit before, language matters, and I saw lots of people nodding about language. Yeah, it matters. I don't want to talk to you if I feel shamed. Giving young people the words beforehand. Be open and direct. Take the cue from them. If they're being open and direct to you and they're asking you a direct question, it's okay to give that straight back, directly, age appropriately. If you're authentic and genuine and you're open and direct, they will be more likely to be open and direct with you. So be curious and explore the who, the when, and the why. Be very mindful of asking for a friend. Because if I don't know if I can 100% trust you, I'm not going to be that vulnerable with you. But what I might do is I want to throw it out there because I really want to hear what you have to say because you've actually given me good advice and you've kind of been honest with me. Feel like I can trust you, but can I really? So I'm just going to ask for someone else. Again, as we talked about before, using those real world examples for young people that actually apply to their context. What a 16 and 17-year-old having bang on their words will be different to what you told 11-year-old got bang on their words. But they may be experiencing similar things, just slightly age appropriate. For us, we come from a really big place of connection with or correction. So what we want to work with is we want everyone to be connected. I find young people don't listen if they're feeling like they're constantly being corrected. Like you're not in this to hear where I'm coming from, you're not on my side, you're not doing that. You just want to tell me all the things I'm doing wrong, which is what the last 5 other people that have been in my world have done. So if we have that connection first, we do a lot of group work. We love that peer connection before correction. One of my favourite things is we get to like session 6 and something goes wrong before I can open my mouth. Before I open my mouth, another young person at the table corrects the young person because they've created a connection within the group. They've got their little hierarchy going. They know how it all works out. They feel safe enough within the group to share. And they go, mate, that's not okay. And I go, my work here is done. I could pretty much finish today and know that we've achieved work in that space. That's a lot in that group work in that context. If young people have the language to share those frustrations and to share the emotional angst at home as well, it can reduce conflict. Because again, behaviour is a type of communication. If we give other ways to communicate that's more proactive and it can work, then we don't necessarily need to do that. So I'm just going to read the slides because that's so fun. So in regards to family violence, if we think about young people as victims of violence in their own right, a lot of the time they have their own experience of after witnessing family violence and what that can look like. They know what they're looking at. They know how it works. But if we can give them the actual language to understand, like so 6 years ago when we started, if I said the word gaslighting in a room with young people, they would have looked at me blankly. They would not have known what I was talking about, would have explained it all, it would have been things. We walk in now and I go, how about tell me all about the different types of family violence that you've done and what do they mean? And someone will say gaslighting. And they can usually reel off what it means and how it works. So there's a lot more awareness and education for young people about what it all looks like. But no one still necessarily talks really openly and directly with them about how that applies to them in their world, in their relationship. And when we talk to young people, they still often talk to us like it's a grown-up thing. Oh, that didn't happen to us. Like we say grown-ups do that. And we're like, okay. So getting them to understand how they apply that in their world. We'll get to public school and then So if you would like to use a QR code that was graciously developed for us by the centre because it's outside my skill set. Okay. So loosely developed off the Duluth Wheel the young people within our groups, when we would use the Duluth wheel, they were kind of like, roll their eyes up. They weren't real keen, were they? And they didn't think it kind of applied with the outer structures, and they kind of went, it's a grown-up thing, right? So we thought, okay, let's take something that's a little bit easier. So in the conversations that we're having with young people, we took the different things that they were talking about, and we kind of went, some of that underpinning stuff doesn't necessarily apply. And that kind of worked with some really brief, short, sharp, take a look, see what you want to work with there. We hand it out in the group, and then we do it, if we're doing group work, we will hand it out in group context as part of our curriculum. And then we do an exercise with that to explore it. On the back page is a bit more of a fact sheet. So there's a bit more of an in-depth conversation, a lot more words and descriptive about how that would work and what that applies. We really wanted it to be a one-pager. So that's where we're sitting. It is one of the, when we hand it out, it's from a practice perspective, it's probably one of the few handouts that don't have to be on the way out the door, which we kind of like, which means that it kind of speaks to them and it works. So it's plain English and it provides reference point for young people. Do you want to talk about how you use them in the group work?
Sure. Is when we're facilitating, we ask all the young people about what type of different minds they know about. So they'll start writing off some stuff. We'll use a whiteboard. We'll start putting some stuff up on the whiteboard about what they do know, and then what sort of things go into those categories. So once we've done that, we sort of then step into the wheel. We'll go through. Sometimes we take turns on saying we're going to reading out of the wheel the things that are in it, what that means, if they've actually identified or have seen any of those sort of things happen within their life. And then what we sort of do is we do a few activities. So one activity that we do is we watch a short clip on YouTube, a love story, it's called, and it actually goes through quite a few different things on the wheel. And what we do is we get them to highlight, as they're watching it, we get them to highlight what they see. So at the end of it, we come back and pretty much just go, hey, where did you see that? What's happening there? And a lot of them are very switched on in regards to some of the stuff that they see, even some of the small things like that financial violence or financial abuse, sorry. They actually go, yep, that's where that was. And it might have been at a club setting where she is just expected to pay for all the alcohol or food or whatever the reason they're going to the pub for. And then she sees a group of friends. And then she goes over to speak to the group of friends, but then he carries on and then they actually just end up leaving. There's another one where they're on the train and someone looks at her. So he gets up, fronts up to this person. Whereas normally she would have saw that as him being protective and him wanting just to make sure that she's safe. He actually then has a different story on that. So she's like, oh, he's just jealous of everybody. He's not actually acting protectively. So we sort of go through that. And young people really, really do pick up on some of those things. We also had a few examples where we were going through the sexual abuse one. They were talking about consent and they had a really good understanding of consent. But what happened was one of the young people in that group identified something that was happening to them at home that was not actually safe and it wasn't appropriate. They ended up going to wellbeing because we always encourage people before class that if there is anything too heavy, they don't have to participate within that particular activity or that we're doing. And we always checking on them. So the reason we have two facilitators is because one of them is facilitating and like sort of getting the discussion. The other one's actually scanning the room, making sure that no one's feeling uncomfortable, or if they start to disengage, we can sort of take that person aside and like encourage them to go to wellbeing or just touch base with them and work with the temperature. And they actually end up going to wellbeing and actually stated and disclosed the things that were happening at home was actually sexual abuse. And then that went further on. And we then stepped out of that because we just facilitated that discussion. And because nothing was disclosed in class, we would then normally make a notification ourselves, but we didn't actually have any information. So it went to wellbeing. We've had a few different things that happened over the course of using the wheel. And it's been quite not always directed at us, but we've had some really good feedback from the schools in regards to people using it, because she actually took this model to the wellbeing and actually started pointing out the different things that were sort of happening for that person, and they ended up getting the counselling and stuff that they needed to progress.
Yeah, and her connection with wellbeing was stronger than her connection with us at that time, and we don't really mind where the connection is as long as you've got one and it's safe for you. But being able to take, like in that instance, it was a hard copy version, so didn't really have the language, didn't know what to say, but to be able to go, these are the things that happened to me, was really powerful for that young person. That other people can do. So in that, whilst that's part of our curriculum, it is not designed to be used as a standalone tool at any point. It's a bit of a discussion encourager. It's a bit of a thing, that a reflective tool, however you want to use it. So you can use it in the group setting like Craig talks about. There's lots of different clips that you can apply it to. Young people then get to do that repetition work. They get to do that application in real life terms and how that works. We do a lot of family context work. We would use this tool either in an overall conversation. If you've got quite a good connection with the family and you've talked about previous family violence that's happened in the family between the adults, whatever else, you might go into a deep conversation about how the young person experienced that using the tool as a guide with the family overall. They can themselves with each other. It could just be surface conversation too, and if it's like a social education kind of stuff, this is what it can look like depending on where each family is at and each young person is at in the work that we do. We meet them where they're at. There's always choice and control. In the individual setting for learning, we might have it, in everyone's care for us. So we usually got it. The appropriate time will come up. There'll be a conversation. Hey, guess what happened at school? You might pick the young person up and they start telling you about Jack and Jill had a bit of an altercation at lunchtime. I don't know. But there's an opportunity there because he gave her a little bit of a shout, or because he shared an intimate picture of her, whatever it could be. There's a whole bunch of conversations there. And you can have a little bit of conversation. Oh, did you know that sits in this category or that's this? So the conversations should always be natural and organic in nature. It might be that you go, oh, I've got this thing, I can bring it next week and we can talk about it a bit more. So maybe it's not a today conversation, but maybe it's for a future conversation. It's designed to promote conversation and to be something that a young person can perhaps take a look at or have it on their phone for a later date. So you might think you didn't get in that day, but 3 weeks later they're going to go, no, the thing you gave me. Like, and then there's a conversation about it because there's been that time to process information and to really think about it. I don't know, maybe time. Yeah, only just.
Yeah, only just.
Right.